If people want to wave, say hi. Denise Hills, and you can introduce yourself as you want to in your breakout rooms if you want to explain where you're from and so on. And then Melissa Cragen, who's well, doesn't have a picture at the moment, but and then Christine Kirkpatrick is coming in on the next session as a speaker. So welcome everyone. So just to get started, I've got my screen shared. I am not doing it in full mode because then I lose some things. I'm just going to leave it like this with the screen, the other slides showing. So one thing that's important first is if you came in a little bit late, there's a participant list that is both on the Kiko chat schedule and on this slide here, that second one down, participant list, the bit.ly there, if you wouldn't mind going to that location, putting your contact information, that would be great. We've got lots of hopefully discussion and feedback in this whole session, and so a place for initials if you want to put your initials down when you make comments. That's what that's intended for. So that's one of the first ones. So welcome. One of the things that we wanted to do, just to go over first as a welcome, is to give you a little bit of a sense of the Zoom and Kiko chat. I'm assuming if people have probably gotten some experience with this already, so not much is needed to do that. The full agenda with the timing is on the Kiko chat, as you can probably see. And then there are also documents on Google Drive that are linked a little bit later down, which is where we will keep notes during our breakout sessions. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But the other thing I wanted to mention was the community participation guidelines. And Denise, do you want to mention that? Talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The ESIP has just recently updated and approved fairly comprehensive community participation guidelines, which essentially boil down to please be a decent human being. We don't expect any issues, but if there are, if you go to the link at the top of the agenda linked in Kiko chat, there is also a link to how you report any issues that you may have. And please, if you do have an issue, you're welcome to raise it directly with me, or you can submit it through integrity accounts, which can also take anonymous submissions. So please enjoy.
Great, thank you, Denise. And I see Julianne Snyder is on too. Julianne will be joining us a little. Hello, Julianne, nice to see you. You want to introduce, just wave since you're here, Julianne Snyder, or there you're now, you're unmuted. Julianne will be talking about one of the FIPS, the fair implementation profiles a little bit later. So welcome, Julianne. Okay, so just briefly, we included the goals for the session, in a wordy format on the Kiko chat, so you can see what those are, and I've got those kind of highlighted here on the slide. Basically, we're interested in finding out what people know about implementing FAIR for your community, and community can be defined as a project, as an organization, as a service, something that you are working on or about that you would like to make more fair. And we can talk more about that in the breakout sessions as well. But also then we wanted to give you some idea about what Go Fair is and the verification framework. That's the context in which we're talking about this today. And then provide an opportunity for people to begin to create or adapt an existing FAIR implementation profile using this DS wizard that the Go Fair people have come up with, and then are working on, and then talked at the end about what's next to help establish the FAIR ecosystem and FAIR framework. So those are the overt goals, and our hidden goals, though, I think are really important, especially following on from what Denise was talking about with the participation guidelines. So we're presenting, we're being moderators, we're kind of coordinating this whole thing, but there are a lot of experts in this room who know about a number of things related to implementing FAIR. They may be experts in FAIR itself or in metadata that would be important for FAIR. You may be more knowledgeable about your own domain data use, your own data repository, your own or other kinds of parts of the infrastructure that you work with your own data. So as an expert, we're interested in sharing and really discussing what is really necessary to do in order to move the understanding about how to make this FAIR data system ecosystem real and effective. So the ecosystem is kind of a broad look, including data, services, infrastructure, and so on. And so the important thing is to really share what we know, share what we don't know, and see if we can figure out, how to move things forward. So it's definitely intended to be a discussion. We've got Eric Schultes is coming on too from Go FAIR a little bit later in this part one, and he'll give us the Go FAIR context. And both Christine and Melissa are from the Go FAIR USA office, and Christine will be talking about that a little bit again in the second session. So that's a context in which efforts are being made to get FAIR implemented. So the whole idea with this session is really to see if there's something that ESIP can do, either in this session as we work on our FIPS themselves, or to if you're going to work on something later, is there something that we can contribute from an earth science point of view to the whole movement of getting a FAIR data ecosystem moving? And Eric is going to be using different terms that for essentially the same thing, but I just wanted to give you kind of a look at what we're thinking of, what we wanted to do from the point of view of, in some ways more abstract, more ESIP kind of language that I've heard us use over the years. So anyway, that's an important. The key thing is there that if you've got a question about something that you don't know about, know that you also have knowledge that you could. We really hope you can share too in the discussion. So that's really an important part of this whole thing. So. That is basically anything what we wanted to do. The idea for the breakout is, I'm going to cover this over here now for the moment. The idea for the breakout sessions and for the feedback is that you can use chat for any kind of questions that you might have, and certainly, the moderators will be watching. Hopefully I'll be watching chat and notice if there's somebody that's got a question and can unmute themselves and ask it, or notify whoever is talking that's what's happening. But the idea with the breakout sessions is we wanted to randomly assign people to a room. So you'll be in room 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we'll each of 4 sessions will be discussing one of the FAIR principles. So room 1 will be discussing the FAIR principle, and Melissa is the moderator for that. The next, and these are going to be about 10 minutes apiece. We're planned for 10 minutes apiece. About a minute before, we'll be notified, and we, the moderators, will be leaving the room and then coming to the main room and then going to the next room to talk about our own issue. So Denise will move from, room 1, or sorry, I keep saying Denise is FAIR, I don't know why. Melissa will be in room 1, then next she'll be in room 2, then room 3, room 4. So you all will stay in place and we'll move. So that's what we're going to try to do. So you'll get to know each other within the groups. And the idea is to, when we move in, the moderators move in, hopefully everyone gets a chance to write down some thoughts about what the question, which is again is on the Kiko chat. Basically, the first question, the main question is, what if any issues do you have or about implementing the principle we're talking about from the point of view of your community. So is there something you don't know? Is there a question about it? You know, what we're trying to do is get an understanding of where people are in terms of their knowledge of FAIR from the point of view of implementation. So that question will be asked again and again for each of the principles. There will be a notes document in each for each of the principles that the moderator will drop into the chat, or you can see it from the Kiko chat here too, as we go along, and then that's where you would add your comments or questions and any notes that happen as a result of the sessions, as a result of the discussions in the breakouts. Then at the end would come together and kind of report out and share about that. And then after that, we would take, get the context of the Go Fair with Eric coming in and probably Natalie talking about an instance of where Go Fair has been successful in sharing data using a fair data implementation perspective for COVID data. Okay, so I think that's it. Anything else I should clear up, moderators? Any questions anybody has about the process? It'll be a game, a dance. Nope. Okay. So yeah. So Dan Keys is our staff person, and Zachary Robbins, our technical staff for us. But they'll be Dan will be taking us into the different breakouts. I think we're ready to go.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is when I click this button to open the rooms. Each room will have about 7 people in it. I'm going to set a timer on my clock here for 9 minutes. After 9 minutes, I'm going to send a message to all the rooms saying there's 1 minute remaining. And that really only matters to the 4 moderators because they are the ones who are going to come back after that minute to this main room, and then I will move them to the next room. Everybody else just stay where they're at. Any questions on that? If you don't want to be in that room for whatever reason, this is for everybody now, you can come back to this main room, talk to me, and tell me where else you should go or what's going on. All right, here we go.
We could probably spend a couple minutes, but I don't want to take up. We need to be finished by 12:30 too. So, or you could add. I guess we can share. We can also do this maybe during the time when we're all working together on the 5th.
Past the 30-minute mark at the end, 12:30, whatever time zone you're in, that's fine too.
Yeah, except that people probably want breaks. What do you think? Anybody have opinions about whether should we just go on with?
Why don't we do brief 1 or 2 sentence report out from each of the groups, and then if we want to have any discussion around that, if people want to hang out during the break, that's when.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
That way we don't impinge too much more on Eric's time too.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's see here. Okay, you want to? Let's see, Melissa, you want to start as
Sure.
the F?
Happy to. So there were many, and we'll copy these into the main document, but there were many kinds of challenges described. Some of the challenges, I'm just going to give you two types or three. One is in terms of the kinds of connectivity across services, the handshakes that need to happen, the moving of or making things findable from one system out through bigger systems. And so that came up in several examples. So having a service where my local repository, I put something in, I make the descriptions, those metadata descriptions go out to other services that are larger platforms, and there can be some real challenges with whether or not those items actually get exposed out in the broader system. Another really significant problem is really just with search systems across services and precision and recall. So the ways that users come to systems to find things and whether or not they actually are satisfied with the relevance of what they find, or whether they feel like they get the sort of the breadth of things that they're looking for. So there were a handful of others. I'll leave it at that, but really interesting discussions, and thanks everybody for your input.
That's good, Denise.
Great. Wow, great discussions. And there were definitely some common themes. There were common themes about proprietary use of data, proprietary data, or data that have actually use restrictions, data licensing, the ethical use, ethical issues around making data fully open and accessible, issues around either data sets that don't exist anymore or have been superseded, how to most appropriately handle that. And issues around kind of gatekeeping and licensing of data. There were a couple other things as well, but those were the ones that seemed to come up the most.
That's good. Natalie?
Thanks. I would say that what we found out in the interoperability breakout was that ontologies and vocabularies are the challenge, but they're also the solution. And that machine actionable I or interoperability relies on being able to resolve ontology terms to their place in a relationship. And that metadata and data sets are only as interoperable as their compliance with standards and metadata schemas are. In other words, if a data set is incomplete or uncompliant, it doesn't matter if its standard is one that is highly interoperable. So those are some of the highlights of what we discussed.
That's good, great. Okay, and from the reuse point of view, I think the thing that came up a couple of times was the fact that it's kind of unclear sometimes about what is actual provenance information and how that relates to data quality, where those fit, and they're treated differently in different kinds of standards. So knowing what to do for that is something that may vary and needs to be resolved to some extent in terms of sharing. There were some issues also about understanding what can be machine actionable versus what is human actionable, and I mentioned, I think Eric will cover some of that with what GoFair is doing. But then the other issues were that in order to get the metadata in the first place, researchers don't always know where the tools are, if there are existing tools to collect provenance and so on. And so curators need to be involved, and sharing that information can sometimes be a challenge, even if you're using like a PROV standard, for instance, or EML in one of our cases. And then let's see, the other issue is again about licensing and understanding when you should license as a repository, if you're speaking for the producer versus the original source of the data, for instance. Knowing when to do that and what licenses to use are really issues for people. So those were the key things. Anybody have a quick comment that they want to add to anything that we mentioned? Okay, I'll take, please, if you think of anything while we're talking, please add the notes to the document. This document, the Kiko chat document, has a place to put notes as well that are sort of general. So please add there if you want to. So now what I'd like to do is to introduce Eric Schultes from GoFair. Eric has been busy for quite a long time, keeping everything, all the balls up in the air. And what we've asked Eric to do is to give a context for what GoFair is doing and how they're, in the process of finding tools and examples in the current environment to move the FAIR ecosystem, data ecosystem forward in terms of implementation. So, Eric, do you want to just share your screen and
yeah,
go through your slides that way?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Let's see, I got a screen here, so maybe you can see.
Yep. Fit for SB. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, is that?
It should be ESIP, but there you go.
Okay, that's my
there you go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Everybody has the right to correct my spelling errors on my slides at any time. So yeah, thank you, Nancy, for the invitation. I just chatted to Melissa that, I have a background a long time ago. I started out in Earth and space sciences and sort of diverged into biochemistry and evolutionary biology. But it's always nice for me then to come back to this environment. And so it's a real pleasure to be here. And I have to say too, I'm happy to give this presentation, but I'm so impressed with Nancy and Natalie's grasp on this whole idea of a FAIR implementation profile. You guys have really taken the ball and run with it. And it's like really amazing to me to see how far this can be developed, in a very different context. So really wonderful. And Nancy, I have to say thank you also for maybe some guidance here on what to present today. Here's sort of three elements that I'll address today, and we'll try and keep this within 15 minutes or so. But the first question is, what is the most important problem that this larger verification framework can help out with? And so where'd it come from? Why are we doing this? And I'll try and build up that story here in just a few slides. And it really goes back, to the last time I saw Nancy and Natalie in person, which was in Atlanta at the GoFair meeting that was there that was run by Christine Kirkpatrick and Melissa. And it's hard to believe how the world has changed since February 23 or whatever it was. We won't even go into the number of reported COVID infections, or certainly we don't have to mention the number of deaths associated with the pandemic, but just this incredible upside down world that we live in. Very soon after we got back from Atlanta in March, the Vodon implementation network was launched, and it grew like crazy. We have over 200 people and organizations signed up to it. There's like 18 cluster groups that are doing work within this implementation network. Everybody feels this tremendous sense of urgency and importance behind it. Almost immediately, there were 2 funded projects in Vodon. And we collectively called this Project A because we were anticipating many more projects. But the first one is funded by the Philips Foundation, and the second one from the Dutch ZoneMV organization. And this is the reason for this verification framework. What happened was the Vodon implementation network effectively, I think, doubled the need for coordination in the GoFair office. It was already just this one implementation network was so complicated, so many moving parts, different organizations, technologies, approaches, data sets, that we really felt that the small GoFair staff was no longer going to be able to do the manual connecting the dots, and that we needed a kind of a framework in which people who were interested in somehow making their data more fair, that they could be given a framework where they could plug themselves in. They could say, yeah, this is where I belong, or this is what I'm interested in. And that more and more we can try and get all these stakeholders to self-organize, but in some coherent way. So this slide is just to say, lots of complexity. And what emerged from the funded research projects in just the last, 8 to 10 weeks is this 3-point verification framework. Because these 3 elements were happening in the funded projects. And we thought, well, this could also serve as a framework for the other stakeholders in Vodon, and then also in the wider Go Fair context. So here's the Phillips Foundation project. The idea was to set up a network of fair data points in 6 African countries. Likewise, at the LUMC in Leiden, the ZonMV funded the idea that there would be a fair data point at the Leiden University Medical Center. And in each case, these projects were to host, or let's say these fair data points were there to host what are called patient case report forms. So if a patient is diagnosed with COVID, there's some standard forms you can complete that then kind of make it a little bit more uniform on how you collect this data. But as anticipated now, as of July 1, the Dutch have a national COVID research program to, in fact, set up fair data points with these case report forms all across the Netherlands. And it's following very much the same thing. And what we could do in each case with these projects was to map our actual work that we were doing. So we were working to create metadata, and that's this first element, running metadata for machine workshops, to create like Vodon specific or say COVID research specific metadata. And that metadata, those metadata schema, would be a component of a larger overall fair implementation strategy or fair implementation profile. And that these 2 things together, the metadata for machine workshop and your fair implementation profile, would be everything that you would need to configure your fair data point. So that this fair data point, this repository of fair metadata, would be appropriately annotated or configured to announce to the world that this is a Vodon specific fair data point and it's hosting these case report forms. Oh, and by the way, just a small digression from yesterday, there was a pretty major advancement in the Africa project. Uganda, in particular, Kampala International University, launched what's called Vodon in a box. And this is a collection of software. It's the fair data point. It's a very simple wizard type environment that allows you to enter patient data into this case report form. And it ends up being semantically interoperable by doing that. And then it's all connected on a triple store. So there's even some query interfaces built in. So it's kind of a complete, Vodon in a box, Vodon fair data point in a box. And the guys in Kampala University launched it yesterday. So that was seen as a kind of a milestone for that project. But in the meantime, while we were developing these this 3-point plan and kind of mocking this up, we had already a working group established for metadata for machine workshops to sort of develop this concept and the format for these workshops, to develop some standards around it. And there's a handbook that was started, the Metadata for Machine Handbook, which begins to lay out some of these things. And it's a work in progress. It's not done yet, but we figured, yeah, this would be a useful tool. But within the last 10 weeks, the fair implementation profile also formed a kind of an official working group in Go Fair. And there's also the ambition now to create a handbook for the fair implementation profile and how you make them, what they look like, what, how they can be used. And now, just as of 2 weeks ago, there's a working group on the fair data point as well. And this is just a bunch of links that these materials will now be consolidated in each case into a handbook for each of the 3 points. But now it's kind of a no-brainer. We will combine this into a single 3-point verification handbook. And we already have on the GoFair website a more stylized view of this 3-point verification framework. We think it's generic enough and robust enough to go with any kind of disciplinary type data, but it's also formulaic enough. It's simple and it's compelling, so people can figure out how they can start verifying their own resources in some way that makes sense, it's coherent, that they can make a road plan, etc. Yeah, and this is just a slide to say that the 3 handbooks are now in the works. And last thing I'll say is about this is that the COVID research program in the Netherlands has done an amazing thing. They've taken this incredibly bold step. They are mandating that every funded project in this research program produces fair data. And they are allowing about 5% of the research budgets for each researcher to be used at the discretion of that PI for verification efforts. And also there's about 500,000 set aside on 2 smaller projects to actually build up a fair infrastructure to support this COVID research data verification. So it's in a pretty amazing step where the funder is mandating, but then also really in a very realistic way supporting the verification of that. And by the way, the plan for Zone MV in this research program is in fact the 3-point plan. So it's really taken off like crazy. It's been very busy the last 3 or 4 months, but also very productive. And the answer to this question then is, what's the most important problem? It's a coordination problem. It's just trying to get people synchronized and aware of what other groups are doing through M4Ms or through fair implementation profiles, so that we can get convergence much faster on fair implementations going forward. That's so that's point 1. Point 2, what the heck is a FIP anyways? And how does it fit into this 3-point framework? So I drew this sketch very early on in the Vodon project. This is a sketch of a fair implementation profile for this Vodon implementation network. And basically the fair implementation profile is just the fair principles and your choice of fair enabling resources that are out there to implement each of those principles. And in Vodon, there was a decision very early on that we were going to use a fair data point to expose this data. And what's nice about making, and I'll say, the reason I'm listing the fair data point for F3, and if you remember, F3 is asking for, what is the permanent connection between your metadata and your data? What's that permanent link that you're establishing? And I think of the fair data point as a piece of infrastructure that if it does anything, it's that important job. It's keeping a permanent link between your machine actionable metadata and your data resources, wherever they may be. But the important thing by making a decision for a fair data point is that we already begin to see other fair principles falling into place because of that decision. The fair data point, at least the implementation we are using, is based heavily on Perl unique identifiers. It's based on RDF as our knowledge representation language. And one of the vocabularies it's using for metadata exposure is the data catalog. So we're already beginning to fill in our fair implementation profile simply by choosing our infrastructure for this. I'm showing in blue here other choices that are being made on, or let's say by the domain researcher themselves. So here are vocabularies that were used to build the RDF and the semantic model behind the case report forms that we're using. And so this is an example then where the domain researcher is making choices. And then lastly, these principles here, F2 and R1.1, 1.2, these are, I think, what we consider like classical metadata type elements. And these are the kinds of things that you would do in a metadata for machine workshop. So if the Vodon implementation network runs these workshops, and we will be doing that in the COVID program, metadata components will be built and decided upon, and these can then augment the FAIR implementation profile for Vodon. There's other slides here. I won't, just in interest of time, I won't go through them in detail. I think maybe we've seen these before, but the idea of the FAIR implementation profile is that a domain community, so a community of some sort, is making choices to either reuse existing resources to implement FAIR, or if they don't see what they need, they may accept then the challenge to build something new. And the idea is that we want to encourage the reuse of existing resources as much as possible and build things new only when it's necessary. This is one way to look at FAIR implementation profiles. So, we like to capture this data in a machine actionable way. So this is really just an RDF graph of FAIR implementation profiles. The purple nodes are communities that are making their choices. The blue nodes are the resources that they're choosing to use. And then the yellow are representing the overlaps, or resources that are being used by more than one implementation network. And so the yellow nodes begin to represent a kind of analysis over the space of FAIR implementations, and it begins to give us insights into how we could even begin to optimize FAIR implementation profiles to, say, increase interoperability, or to avoid the creation of, or the reinventing the wheel on existing resources. We have an ontology behind the FAIR implementation profile. And so you can see that we talk about communities and we talk about FAIR enabling resources. And we have other components here that help us to build up a conceptual model so we can have really rich semantics on the FAIR implementation profile. This is mapping in all kinds of things like the FAIR principles. And so there's lots of interesting information that we can bring into your FAIR implementation profile as well. Here's a more detailed look. Here's 3 communities that are trying to build these distributed learning platforms, or these FAIR data trains. And we can already begin to see and cluster, their common use of resources. These 3 groups had never talked to each other before. They were developing a very similar infrastructure in completely isolated domains, but we brought them together and they completed their FAIR implementation profiles, and we could see that. And there's other ways to look at this. Of course, all of this is based on a very simple questionnaire. It's about 20 or 30 questions, depending how you count. We're up to version 3.4 now in this questionnaire. We really try to get the wording and the nuances as close as we can to prompt the user to give us exactly what's needed. And of course, this questionnaire can be used as a spreadsheet the way it's listed here, but we have it embedded, of course, in the FAIR implementation profile wizard, we call it, which is just a nice interface to give out the questions and then to receive the answers in such a way that we can make a machine actionable FAIR implementation profile from within that wizard environment. So, so that's what the FAIR implementation profile is and looks like. And what would be a good example of this? Just recently now, we upgraded the FAIR implementation profile wizard. And I think you've probably seen it by now, but we've augmented it a little bit more with some annotations and some information to help guide the user. And we have now created, as of last week, the version 1.0 FAIR implementation profile for Vodon. And I printed that document out in human readable form and you can get to it at the OSF link here. But here's what the modern, or let's say the upgraded fair implementation profile wizard looks like. One of the things we upgraded here was, when we prompt you with a question like, give us the globally unique persistent identifier for your metadata records, the text box is powered by fair sharing. And so we can, in many cases, link to kind of a canonical reference for that resource. And that makes things much more machine actionable at the other end. If fair sharing doesn't contain what you need, then you're free to go in and put the free text description. And we added this thing called considerations, which is basically just a commentary. It's a note to yourself, or it's a note to others, why it is you made a choice for as you did here. And this idea of a consideration is actually an ontological term that's built into the FIP ontology. So we can capture this here, and we can begin to also keep that within the semantic model. And then, like I said, when you go through the entire questionnaire, push a button at the end and out pops your fair implementation profile. In this case, is a human readable PDF, but you can also get the JSON LD form. And we have another script that can change that JSON LD into RDF nano publications. And I think Natalie was taking you through some of the details on the Vodon fair implementation profile. Last two things I want to mention, that your efforts today could have quite a nice presentation opportunity at the International Fair Convergence Symposium. The date has been shifted back to November, and it's going to be a completely online event from November into December. But there is a nice opportunity then to present, for example, your fair implementation profile. In this case, especially if you've been able to manage to get to some kind of convergence through this exercise. But there's also in this symposium now what they call a fifth strand. There's a new theme that's opening up around the 3-point verification process. And there will be a series of workshops or hackathons where groups will be invited to actually enter into the 3-point verification process with their metadata for machine workshop or their fair implementation profile, and really try to show convergence in real time during the symposium. And then the last thing I want to mention is that you may be aware or recall that the Data Intelligence Special Issue on fair implementations that came out last year was very nice. It was kind of a broad view of fair implementations. The next issue is going to be focused on fair implementation profiles. And in this case, your machine actionable FIP will be your data set, essentially. And the article that you write would be a long form of your considerations. Why did you choose these implementations and not others? What were the choices that you had? And how did you achieve some kind of convergence by making better choices or different choices? So I'll leave it at that. I hope I didn't go too far over time, and I'm happy to take questions if you'd like. Thanks.
Great, Eric. That's great. That covers all those questions. I think at least. And I'm glad you mentioned the journal article too, because that's another incentive for people if they're interested. Are there any questions that people have for Eric right now? We're 5 minutes over, so we could have a couple questions, and then Natalie, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of being involved in the decisions that were made for the Vodon.
What I would do is I've posted a link to the dashboard that Eric showed on his slides to the Zoom chat. I would encourage members of today's session to go visit Vodon as an exemplar FIP. And just to think about the FIP as a way of communicating your decisions, not only to your community, but sort of as technical documentation, so it's easier to do those implementations down the road. And to think about that as you fill out the FIP. When Julianne shows us hers for Eagle Eye, that will become more clear, and I'd be happy to answer more questions about the Vodon FIP or help people understand the way the wizard challenges the user with the questions. But really, the ultimate response is your answers in that grid to document your community or your system's choices.
Yeah, and one of the things too, I think this is true, Eric, is that from a FIP you can also generate machine actionable DNPs. Is that right?
So yeah, and this is I think the thing that really makes people interested in the fair implementation profile, it's that, you know, you can think of the fair implementation profile as essentially answering the fair component of your data stewardship plan. So all the standards and technologies that you want to use to implement FAIR are basically listed here. And so, and then this is only in hindsight that we figured this out, but you know, we borrowed the data stewardship wizard interface. We repurposed it to represent the fair implementation profile questionnaire. But then we thought, well, wait a minute. This is the same environment as that we use to write data stewardship plans. So Christina Hetna has made some very nice questions of the fair implementation profile onto certain questions or relevant questions in the data stewardship plan knowledge model that's in the data stewardship wizard. So what we're envisioning is that by completing your fair implementation profile, you're creating, you know, the implementation profile for your community. And then a data steward working in your community could say, okay, I can see the fair implementation profile for ESIP. I will click on that. And now, you know, 30% of my data stewardship plan is already auto-completed and it's ready to go. And I know it's compliant with the ESIP fair implementation profile. So it's a way of really kind of fast tracking the communication of your implementation choices and making sure that you know, other people can get to it very easily, and it, you know, it can help to answer your data stewardship planning questions, which is also, I think, viewed by most of us as being a really nice addition.
Gravy, as they say.
Yeah.
Great.
And for those seeking clarification on using the wizard in demonstration view, you may demonstrate it as the user with email guest@example.com, password guest. And if you have any trouble getting in, let me know and I'll make sure you can give the wizard a try.
Yeah, we're going to be actually. Go ahead.
Go ahead and test it out. You know, you can make you know, prototype fair implementation profile. You're not going to break anything in there. It's just go ahead and have fun with it.
Yeah, that's the next section after the break. We'll be demoing that tool very briefly, and then showing a couple other either public or read-only FIPs that have been created and talk about some of the issues associated with it. They're also on the Kiko chat schedule. There's you can go to the Fair Matrix link and set up an account too if you want to, although you can do that later, and as Natalie said, use that guest password. So that's what we'll be looking at a little bit after the break.
Yeah, and like I say, I'm really impressed, Nancy and Natalie, that you guys were so bold as to you know, to present all this, because
or foolish,
it's still so new, you know, everything's so new here.
Yeah, it's changing, and that's okay, but you know, I mean, the good thing about ESIP community is that we're willing to try things, and, you know, not everything works all the time. And part of the idea here was to provide feedback to the folks who are developing, you know, your organization too, you know, through the tool and through Go Fair USA as well, Christine and Melissa. So, okay, I want to make sure that people, we honor the break, so that if you want to break for 20 minutes until the top of the hour, that's when the next session will start. I will be here, others will be here as well if you have other questions or want to talk more about some of the other issues that come up. The plan for the second session is, as you look at the agenda, is to do the brief demo, as I mentioned. Julianne will talk about her FIP. I will talk a little bit about the clearinghouse one because it's a different kind of animal that might be helpful. And then there'll be time for people to work on their own issues, either with colleagues who are part of your community, or for you as a representative of your community or project, and just going through the questions themselves. In the wizard, using the wizard are an interesting way to really think about the issues. Also, we're going to demonstrate a directory that has been created by the fairsharing.org directory that has a lot of information about standards and so on, and collections that could be used to fill out the form, the FIP, and then that will help supplement or increase the possibility of turning that into a machine actionable FIP as well. So that's all starting at top of the hour. So Eric, thank you very much. Really appreciate your staying up late and coming to see us.
Believe it or not, I've got one more call today.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
This COVID world is upside down.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. The
Yes.
virus hasn't taken any vacations yet, so
No, it hasn't, unfortunately. No.
thanks.
And one more thing, Eric, all of Eric's slides, 200 of them, are available from the Sketch link for these two sessions too. So you can get a lot more information from him, from what he's got created there. So thank you very much, Eric. And we'll go ahead
and by the way, the handbooks that we're putting together, they're open. These would be open book sprints and book projects, and anybody's welcome to contribute to it. And the time frame is pretty soon. We want to have a first draft sometime in September, because we're going to have data stewards located in hospitals all over the Netherlands who are going to have to use these handbooks to verify data for their COVID research projects. So hopefully this whole 3-point thing and the documentation comes together pretty quickly.
Yeah. And maybe we'll have some earth science examples in there too. That'd be great. All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to hang out here. Hopefully see the rest of you at top of the hour.
Great, thanks everyone.
Thanks,
see you later.
Eric. Thank
Talk
you
to you later.
Nancy.
Yep.
The live stream here. Denise, do you want to give me a quick rundown of the session, and are you guys doing any breakouts or things like that?
I will let Nancy do that since this is really her session.
Oh, great, sure.
Okay. Yeah, no,
I got roped in late.
we basically have a couple presentations for about 15 minutes or so, then time for people to work together. What we talked about earlier at the first part of the session is if we have this main room as a place where everybody works together, there might be conversations. And if somebody wants to go off to a breakout room, Dan said we could ask you to open up a room for us. For the people who wanted to do that, they would need to let us know that they want to do that. And then, we'd all come back together towards the end and kind of debrief, then another couple of presentations and then close up. That sound good? So pretty much this room, unless people want to.
You bet. I will just happily, whenever people want to go to rooms, I will make sure that happens.
And we can just do that. They could just either say something or chat, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Something like
perfect. Yeah, I will keep my eye on the chat. And let's see. Like Zach is also here. Hey, Zach.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, we got.
Yep, it's the top of the hour. I'm just going to say a quick hi as the room host. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Burgess. I'm the lab director here at ESIP, and I am the room host for this session. Just a couple quick notes before I hand it over to Nancy. First, I'm sure you're all pros at this now, but if you're not chatting, if you could keep yourself or just check your mute button. If the times when we're not presenting, if you want to have your cameras on, we always love to see faces, but that is absolutely not a requirement. Another reminder that we do have a code of conduct. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, it is linked in the session notes for today. Sounds like Nancy noted there might be some times that we're using the Zoom chat, so just go ahead and familiarize yourself with where that is in your screen. And I will just say welcome and turn it over to Nancy.
Sounds good. Thank you. Nice to have you, Annie. Zachary back again. So the plan for this session is, I think is anybody new to the session, just dropping in, or people? I think it looks like everybody's been here before, if I remember rightly. So what we talked about before, and you can see on the Kiko chat schedule, is we've got a couple minutes of talking about the tool, demoing the tool that we thought we could use. Julian Schneider from Harvard will be showing one of the fair implementation profile that she's developed for her group, her community. And we can look a little bit more closely at the Vodon FIP that Eric was talking about from Go Fair. And then I can also show some, show the FIP, draft FIP that I've created for the data management training clearinghouse. I think that these are different kinds of situations, and they'll illustrate, what some of the issues are for different kinds of data objects, really, or services. And so go through that and then give people time to work on their own FIPs using that tool. So while we're getting started on the Kiko chat, there is the link itself, and I look at my screen that should be shared, I hope. There's the link as well to the fairmatrix.ds.wizard.org. You can either get an account yourself if you want to, and now or later, either way, and or use the guest at theexample.com with the password guest to get in and try this later too if you want to. So that's basically it. What I thought I'd do is just go to that tool then and show you briefly what it looks like. If you log in, as I say, to the Fairmatrix wizard, data stewardship wizard, and I should say this off the bat, because if you do try to log in, it's sometimes very confusing. They have different instances of the data stewardship or DS wizard based on kind of different aspects of the project. So there's one for an information network that Go Fair has, the Data Stewardship Competence Center instance of DS Wizard. There's one for the Fair Matrix and others as well. So if you just go to the demo version, as I did at the very beginning, you'll have to get accounts for each of them, and it's easy to get lost. Let me just put it that way. I spent a lot of time getting lost at first until I figured out what's going on. So that just know that this particular instance is the one that's focused on creating the FIPS. Okay, so when you get there, you'll see that people can see my screen, correct? Is that okay? Good. So this is the wizard has on the left-hand side, navigation-wise, they have a knowledge model editor, a knowledge models, questionnaires, and documents. So for our lesson today, or what we're trying to do today, is essentially fill out a questionnaire for a FIP, or to look at it, or to look at the ones that have. Each of the questionnaires need to have a knowledge model. So we're at the knowledge model screen, and as you can see there, in this particular instance of it, there's a fair convergence matrix questionnaire model, as well as the FIP wizard model. Now the FIP wizard is what was just added yesterday. So I think both Julian and I have used this other knowledge model. I think that's right, Julian, you can cover it differently if you've changed it since then. But I used this one as a knowledge model for my questionnaire. So what you would do is to go into that knowledge model, and then you can use that to then create a questionnaire. So if you go up to the right here, you can create a questionnaire for yourself which we can do that later if you want to. I'm not going to do that right now, but that will take you to the knowledge model editor, where you will then create the FIP. And the documents area is if you have a data policy that you want to, sort of record and recommend as associated with your FIP, then you can add the documents there. When you do go, I guess I will show you that. When you do go to create a questionnaire, that one of the first questions you ask, or is asked of you, besides, is the knowledge model is filled out, you put your name in, and then you can either make it private, public, read-only, or public. And that, as you can see the explanation there, if it's private, you're the only one who can see it. If it's public read-only, you can view it, nobody can change it. If it's public, it can be viewed and changed or used, adapted by others. So that's probably the critical information. One of the other things, though, that I want to mention that is,
Nancy, before
Yes?
you go on, may I ask a question?
Sure. Hi, Ping. Yeah.
Hi. So for this create questionnaire, is that the based on the metrics, or we have to create our own questionnaire?
You would create your own questionnaire using that knowledge model of the matrix.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I forgot I was going with this then. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show just briefly, and Julian will, I think.
Before you go on.
Sure.
Sorry. Could you make the font bigger or something on your screen? It's kind of hard to see out here on YouTube land.
Okay.
Yeah, like maximize your screen and maybe plus, command plus or something more.
Can't quite hear it.
Really
So you can't see it, is that?
Control plus.
Yeah, just ask.
Control plus, that's it.
Ah, thank you. Thank you, because I never know how to do that. Is that better?
It's getting there.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I should have asked that earlier. Yeah, so the only other thing I wanted to show you, and again, Julian, you'll probably go through this as you demo what you've done, is there's an opportunity to use what is called the fairsharing.org directory, and that is also on my slides here. Let me just get to that one. This is a directory at this link. It's just basically fairsharing.org, and I've gone to the standards view to show this. It's a place where you can look for standards that are already defined and put into this registry. If you choose it, then it's it's a way of reusing an existing standard. And again, Julian will show that, I'm sure. So as she's demoing hers, if you want to search, you don't need to log in or register. If you only need to register or log in if you want to contribute. And I will have, I guess I can put that up so we can see it too, what it looks like. But there are some tricks I found in using this we can talk about too. After we get to this, we start really doing it. But as you can see, again, let me see if I can make this a little bigger. It's a curated resource on data and metadata standards. So as you can see, the categories for searching are within standards, databases, policies, collections. You can, and then you can see stats and so on as well. So this is a way to find particularly standards that you want to add as part of your FIP. So I think that's probably all I will show. And then let's see. Julie, do you want to just tell me do you want to run it yourself? You want to share screen? How would you like to do?
Sure, if you can give me screen control, I can just
okay.
You should be able to share right now. No one has to pass the screen around.
Okay.
So just find your share screen.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Let's see. Look, I've got some weird things on my screen. Let's see what happens. Sure.
No. What's it saying? What's it doing?
I don't know. It's suddenly this laptop has a mind of its own and decides to revoke permissions at will. So it seems, okay, here it goes. I think it relented. All right, yay.
We can see it.
You can see it. So I'm Julian Schneider. I work for Harvard Catalyst, which is their clinical and translational science center. So I'm an outlier here, not being in earth science. So this is the first page of a profile that I created for Eagle Eye, which is an open platform, open access repository for research objects, which can be anything from a mouse to a stem cell to a microscope, core facilities, people, whatever you might find in a lab. And the labs themselves are the contents of this. So we don't download data sets, but we point to research resources around Harvard, and we also have nodes at other institutions, all connected by a central search. So the first thing I'll say is this is about Harvard's node, because I have no control over the other nodes in the system. So it's kind of an interesting layer here in that I'm talking about one node of a larger repository system. This is the first page of the survey, and I did this, I think, this was a previous edition of the survey, so it may look a little different now. I'm not really sure, but anyway, this is the basics. The contact, my community is called Eagle Eye, and it's bioinformatics. And when you get to findability, you have questions, and you can either find your answer in fair share here, or if it's not there, you can add whatever you like here. It's basically an open text box. It also means that you can add more if you have more than one answer to these questions. And what I will say is that, did Julian know what she was doing when she started doing this? Zoomers, she did not. I just decided to go in and start filling it out to the best of my knowledge, because I wasn't here when they built this tool. I came in 6 or 7 years later. So when I was looking at some of these, I either had to go to someone else in the organization who might know the answer, or I gave it my best guess, because none of this is set in stone and I knew I could come back and change it. So I did best guessing, and then I would refine my guesses as I found out more information. In this case, we use persistent uniform resource locators for our records, and that is in fair sharing, and it's a drop down. As you start typing, it'll fill it in for you. So there it is, persistent uniform, choose it, and you're done. If it wasn't there, I would add something here. I am an ontologist, and I tend to like URIs and and persistent identifiers. So my inclination is to put an identifier for whatever it is I'm using in this, but you could also add text, apparently, because that works too. And sometimes it's the same answer. So we use pearls, and then we use them also for what I would consider our data sets, which is the information that we get from our core facilities about the stuff that is in them. So the records really are our data. And we use persistent identifiers for everything, because we are an RDF database that is completely controlled by an ontology and an ontology application layer. Anyway, so this is sort of how it looks, and I'm trying to find one that doesn't have a fair share here. In which searchable resources are your metadata records indexed? And it's Google, and fair sharing doesn't contain Google, so I just put that here. Another interesting aspect of going through this exercise is you tend to find problems. I found that we are supposed to be fully Google indexed, but we actually are not. It's kind of wonky and not terribly predictable what is and isn't indexed from our repo into Google. So we'll have to investigate that someday, but for now, most of it seems to be. So I kind of cheated and put it in here anyway. Don't revoke my profile. so this is sort of the way it goes. Again, everything's an OWL. And the other interesting thing about this is you find out what decisions you made early on that were the most effective in adhering to or aspiring to a good, fair data principle profile. In this case, because we use ontologies and we use OWL, that gave us, that basically wiped off a lot of these points automatically. Like it met all these things. So it's sort of interesting to see what decisions you make cover the most points in all of these letters. And I think since it is now, it looks like it is in my time, 3:16, I will cease and desist. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Anybody have any questions for Julian about what she's done? You did get a chance to really see what the choices are, which is fine, that's possible to do on your own.
So I have a comment, not a question. Julian,
Sure.
I wish we had you given this demo in the first week at every semantics session that I was in.
Thank you.
Because
there are a lot of scientists who don't understand why you would ever want to use OWL. And you just said words like, we have a system that, and it's all based on, and it connects groups with different kinds of stuff. And those are all the right things that community needs to hear.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I will say that the easiest way to do it is just go in, create a profile, and start kind of poking around with it. Nothing terrible is going to happen. You can delete it if it all goes wrong. Be brave and just start putting things in, and you can always change and refine it as you find out more about the thing you're describing.
yeah, it definitely, I found that too when I was working on the one for the clearinghouse. You really have to start thinking about the choices that you did make, or you want to make, or you should make, and it's not to mention trying to get a better understanding of how the choices would influence or impact this whole concept of sharing, not only within your own environment, but also outside in a larger community. So one question I would have for you, Julian, is you mentioned that this is only for the Harvard node. What do you think the chances would be of others in your broader node using something like this if they had it? Or is everything kind of established already, or what would it take?
Well, yeah, Eagle Eye is in an interesting place. It's 10 years old, so it's a relatively old tool. And a lot of our nodes have either gone kind of quiet and really aren't being updated, or they're actually just rediscovering this as a great tool and they're just starting out again. So I'd say that latter group, the just starting outers, would find this really useful. Eagle Eye is an interesting example of the perils of funding and sustainability, because it's incredibly stable. We've had almost no downtime in 10 years, but we have no resources to bring it up to speed, like Dockerizing our incredibly complex way of spinning up a new node. But one of the points I also wanted to make is filling this out. It's an exercise in scoping and granularity, because the thing I'm showing now, the metadata schema, the Eagle Eye ontology is made up of many other ontologies, because of course we borrow where we don't, whenever possible. So we include disease ontology terms, we include ISF terms, we include a lot of different ontologies, but I was not going to go through and list every single one of these. So I used some of the important ones, like the Dublin Core metadata element set, which helps with, create our data models. And And of course, Eagle Eye. So again, sometimes it's just a matter of scoping. Do I really want to list out 20 ontologies? No, I don't, because I think that's more confusing than anything. So there's that to take into consideration too. There's no one right way of coming at this.
Right, right. Yeah, and that speaks to the point that, I don't know if Danny is still on now, but in one of the reusability sessions, we were talking about, Danny Kincaid from Bicodemo was talking about the fact that knowing when, I think it was Danny, knowing when to create attribution for different data sets that are part of a synthesized product, that her repository is creating is a difficult choice. And that's kind of it's a similar kind of choice that you had to make, or chose to make. And it kind of depends on what your use case is and what you're doing it for. So it's kind of like a catalog record in a way. You can go to the nth degree if you want to, or you move along based on what the standards are for your own organization and documentation and what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else have anything else any comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to show just briefly a little bit about the clearinghouse, I think, so I can share my screen again.
I'm trying to unshare.
I think you...
Did I? No, there it is. Oh, it went to my other monitor. That's stupid. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I have to do that then. I lost it. Where am I? Here. Share. Okay, so I want to show you this one too, because there are some different issues, and it also addresses some of the issues that Julian mentioned at the beginning, and that has to do with, I'll go down into, let's see, I think it was the findability has these questions. So for those who don't know, the Data Management Training Clearinghouse is essentially a catalog of metadata about content that's exists elsewhere. So similarly, it sounds like to what you're doing, Julian, the data for the clearinghouse is our metadata records. So so some of the questions to do with persistent identifiers for metadata records and so on and so forth. I struggled with deciding now, am I talking about the metadata as the data within this particular catalog, or am I talking about what if we wanted to export all of the metadata that's in the clearinghouse to someone who's interested in importing it into their own system, which is a possible environment, right? So that's the kind of node instance. And so making sure you understand which one you're answering at what time is part of the question. And it is possible to do that. My question would be, how shareable is that? I mean, presumably the FIP should explain to some extent the decisions you made or why. So, so for example, for the findability question here, we use DOIs. And one thing I should explain about the clearinghouse instance is that this is looking forward rather than where we are now on a content management system. So we're going to be moving this into a database environment, and this is what I'm answering for is what we will be doing. So just to make that clear. But so we've chosen to use DOIs for the metadata, for the identifiers for the metadata records in the inventory, in the register or catalog. There may or may not be, and that's a question that's down here with the data sets. The same question is asked, what do you use for a persistent identifier for the data sets themselves? So I answered this as to, the data set in this case is the content that's someplace else. That content, that educational resource, that tutorial may or may not have a DOI associated with it. So I can I cannot answer that question for that as a data set. So I don't need to go through all of them for people unless they're interested, but there is, those are the kinds of granularity questions that I think come up as you try to answer this, which are interesting and hope maybe you've got them figured out already. It's nice to have a community of people who work with you on that, but those kinds of questions came up for me. The other thing I wanted to highlight was in this case with the second question of F2, which metadata scheme are you using for findability, what we're using is not in fair sharing. So I put the resource description in here, but then I went into fair sharing and asked them to consider adding that schema to their standards directory. And that's a manually created process. So that hasn't happened yet, but that's something you can do as well. So for instance, Karina, when you were talking about, and again, the reusability session that we were in, you're using EML for some of the provenance in rich metadata areas. If it's not an EML, then that's the sort of thing you could go add, and then other people can reuse it there. So that's an advantage there that it's not a perfect system for searching. It's not a perfect system, it's all kind of in development, just as this DS Wizard tool is. And that, as you can tell from what Eric was talking about, it's a moving target in terms of how they're trying to do this. But these are tools that may be useful for us to do to kind of, as we say, come to some understanding of how to move this fair data ecosystem forward. So that's all I would really show. Did anybody have any questions about anything I mentioned there or raised there?
There was a question in the chat.
Okay.
Ramapriyan, I hope I said that right, who is asking, why is there a URL in the entry after the DOI and F1?
Go back to the first entry in your the wizard. Yeah.
So thank you. Good question. So this is the ID for the DOI standard that's in fair sharing.
So that gives you an explanation of what DOI is?
Yeah. What? Yes. If you were to, so for instance, if we were to go to fair sharing, let me just take this. And Julie showed this a little bit sort of with the Perl. Let's see, let me copy that. So if we go to the, you can still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I were to enter, so say I'm looking for DOI, as you can see I already have, and I search for it. Hopefully this works. What it will show me, as you can see down here, the results is DOI, and this is the entry in the registry for the DOI. So when you choose this one and put DOI in, it goes to that. You can see it goes to that link. You can't see it right here, but if I were to do a copy of this or hit this, when you go into the wizard and you want to go to fair sharing for your search, when you find DOI and you click on it, then this is what comes up and goes into this field. Does that make sense, Rama?
Not particularly, because I don't see the purpose of that. What value is it adding to the input that you've got for your system?
It recognizes, one of the things that fair sharing does is to recognize how many of the standards are being used. You can get statistics on how many people are using them and in what fields. So you can see, I didn't want to go into this because it's sort of, you'll investigate as you go, but you can find out, kind of information about what the standards are and who's using them. So, if you go up to the fields that they're collecting about this standard, you have the name, you have the abbreviation, you have a type. It's basically a registry of standards that makes everything, if people use the standards that are in here, then everybody's got the same information, sort of a semantic likeness harmonization.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So they're collecting statistics on who's using what, and you know, as you're looking at standards, for instance, if you're trying to decide in creating a FIP or in, you know, your own environment, you see, well, that's interesting. Most people in this kind of, for these kinds of databases that are using DOI. So Figshare using it, Dryad's using it. That's a pretty, plus there are 43 more. So you can see, oh, that's, you know, that's pretty popular. Maybe I should think about that.
Okay.
And then of course, I mean, in our case, we're using JSON for some of the metadata and JSON LD, and so those are in there. And that if somebody's looking at your FIP, then they'll go, oh, okay, well, I'm using RDF, but I know I can still get this data because it's in JSON format, and you can convert, you know, RDF to JSON and vice versa. There are tools available to do that. So it's a way to kind of go, oh, that's going to, as Eric said at one point, you know, it really kind of speeds up the process by which you can share data and metadata.
Okay,
Well,
thank
Nancy,
you.
would it be fair to say too, going back to, you know, the original question, the other reason to do it is to practice what we preach so that these things are so interoperable, well, searchable. And so it's not, we're not entering new text about DOI free form. It's like, here's the record, right?
Right. Yeah. From a semantic point of view, I mean, that's why you have ontologies, right? And thesauri and so on is to be able to use the term that everybody else uses, or link to, you know, if you use a different term, that term that others use.
And Frank had a quick question. He asked, can the same DOI refer to metadata and a data set?
Sure, I would think. Yeah, if that's what you're doing, you're creating metadata records, and you just need to make you'd create a DOI for your metadata record, but the data set that's being described by the metadata also has a DOI. Then you would use it in both cases, and then, you know, people know the difference. So again, in the clearinghouse instance, what we're planning to do is the metadata record itself will have a UUID that's assigned by the system, and then when it is in the process of exporting, if somebody else wants it, it'll turn into a DOI, because you can turn a UUID into a DOI. That makes sense.
So Nancy, I have to say that just getting to fairsharing.org turns out to be useful to the ontology cluster, or actually the whole set of ontology clusters, because things like schema.org are in here.
Yeah.
The Envo ontology and all of that.
Yeah, no, it's I was really happy to see it. It's not perfect, and there's a heavy emphasis, I think, on life sciences and so on, which is great. But that's why I think it would be helpful to get more earth science.
Well, earth science has fewer standard ontologies. The biomedical folks have spent big bucks, and we have.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, but you can add collections too. You know, if you look at it a little more closely, you can see there are other things to add to it as well, if, you know, if they're useful. And, you know, as I say, making some decisions about what you want to use in each of those areas, you know, you can find out more about it. So as an example, again, one of the metadata elements we collect for the clearinghouse is on subjects. And, you know, we've used a list that your RDA group, actually, Ruth, you were pointed us to this in the first place. RDA group is one that we've been using, but this is another option that is, you know, probably maintained a little more regularly, and, you know, has a little bit more of a level of granularity. So it seems like you know, a place that would make more sense to use, that others would use as well. So that, you know, we may well be moving into that when we move into the new system, but that's an example too of how you could use this.
Yeah, no, it looks very useful.
Okay, well, anything else? I mean, what have we got? 1:35. We've got it basically. We can probably spend half an hour, maybe. We had, I think, 45, but maybe 35 minutes if people want to spend some time working with the tools themselves, or just even thinking. Even if you don't fill one out, you look through and the tool itself, the DS Wizard tool, and it's helpful for having you think about your own environment. That's part of what the plan was, if people want to do that. And then we can do that in this big room in silence, or raise questions if people have experience knowing how to work with different technologies, identifier systems, or anything else that comes up where you've got a question. That's what we could do, as well as a group. If people want to work on something and are bothered by conversation, assuming there is any, we can also ask Annie to put a couple people into breakout rooms. We'd like to come back at the end so we can kind of debrief and see if there's any feedback, any questions that the group can answer, or feedback we can give to the DS Wizard tool people, the GoFair tool people. And then the next plan was to talk about what we can do next, if there are things that we might want to do together, and also make sure GoFair USA folks have a chance to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how we can work together, since I guess SDSC is now an ESIP member as well, a partner, as well. So we've got nice connections there we can follow up with, and just see if there's anything that we can do as ESIP itself for subcommunities. So how does that sound?
That sounds good, Nancy. I'm starting doing the create questionnaire, and the name, is that my name or that's the title of the questionnaire?
Where it shows up is in the...
So I'm at the knowledge model.
No, I know.
Click on, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I answered that question, it showed up as being underneath the... Oh, what's wrong with you? Okay, I didn't add anything. Sorry. Okay, so when I get the list of questionnaires, see my name here? That's where it shows up.
Okay.
What it means, and from this point of view, I think, is that you are the spokesperson for your community.
Okay. So that's actually, it's the title of the questionnaire you want to put it in.
The name, well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, maybe I'm not following you. Do you want to share your...
So if you click on knowledge model, and then you click on the fair convergence metrics questionnaire.
Yeah, then.
And then you create one. It asks for name.
Yes,
so
this is right. That's the name of the...
do I put my name?
No.
Or is the title of the questionnaire?
Title of the questionnaire.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I understand that. Yeah, because then when you fill this one out and save it, then the next question is, who are you?
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if anyone does want to work together in a small breakout, you could just put your, I guess you have to chat about that, but you can put your names in the chat as well, and we can create some breakout rooms if you would like, as Nancy said.
So there was a username and password guest and something that was in the earlier one. If you could paste it here again, I'd appreciate it, because I lost it.
Okay.
Yes, and for those of you that might have signed up, you actually get a very different view if you sign up yourself, because there's areas you won't see. So using the guest access is the best way to see everything we're looking at today.
Okay, now I am trying to find...
I pasted it in, Nancy.
Oh, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm having too many screens. I can get rid of this one now. Yeah, so we'll just unmute. I'll just unmute and unmute yourself if you want to have a question, and we'll come back on. And I'll figure out the time on the schedule too of when we'll come back after I find the right screen.
So Nancy, I'm actually trying to do a somewhat real one, and I actually created an account for that purpose. But when I get down to research domain and I click the GitHub to get DRAO release 02.0 owl, find out what domain I should put in, I get an error.
Yeah, that one, that's one of the quirks that you discover fairly soon. What that does, it actually, what they want you to do is to open in Protege.
Oh, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. So that's, you have to download and then open it. If you don't want to do that, one way to do it is to go to fair sharing and look for domains there, but I think it's more accurate in the DRAO.
Probably we should report that as a frequently encountered bug or snafu.
Do you want to mind adding that to the doc?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got about 20 minutes.
So I was actually expecting to see the wizard, but I did not when I clicked on this this link.
Oh, you need to go to here. You need to go to the right link, which is the here. Let me put that in. It's in the Kiko chat too. But let me get it for you.
Do you want me to paste it to the chat?
I got it here. I had.
I can break out with you too, Rama, if that helps.
Okay. Well, let's see. Yeah, that's where I went. That's where I went and signed in with the password, and yeah, maybe I should break out.
Well,
is it Julianne and Rama? You want a room, or do you guys want to work it out here?
Annie, can you send Natalie and Rama to a room?
You bet.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. I'm getting there. Let's see. And hold on just a sec. It's making me do something a bit funny, but let me just restart these rooms. All right, now you should be able to go over there now, Natalie and Rama.
I just put a response to Frank's question. I think I misunderstood what you were asking. So Frank, if you and Chung-Lin, if you want to look at what I answered, it's a little bit different from what I answered. I misunderstood the question, I think. Let's see if there's any.
This is Frank. So actually what we're doing, so we don't separate the metadata and the data sets. If the data set, the metadata are part of the data set as well. Like, so we have a DOI that goes for the data set, and then, the metadata part of it is like basically the attributes that come with it. That's how I do it.
Well, I think, I guess it depends on your system. I think that the gist of the question is, do you have a persistent identifier for the record in your system that is unique? So, and that is so that,
so if somebody, like a UID in the database that we have, for example.
Yeah. Is that what you would think, Julian?
I think I'm trying to remember which part this is, but I think I took it as, if you have a data set and you have a record for that data set, does the DOI point basically to, is it the same for both of them? In which case, yes. That may be problematic if, let's say, you move the data set somewhere else away from the record and you want to separate those things somehow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's best practice to have one for both of them.
Yes.
One for each of them.
One for each.
Yes.
Yeah. That's from again, the machine actionable point of view, it's cleaner and so that's.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Yes. Thank you for your clarification, because I'm so concerned. To me, I think DOI should be very unique to whatever you go to metadata or data set.
Right.
So unless you say they are the same thing, then that's okay. So that's how I would say, unless they are going to the exact same unique, but actually metadata and data are different, right? So.
Right.
Yeah. But if you go to we're using data set as a DOI definition, they always say, DOI should put to a landing page and not directly to the data.
Right.
Landing page goes
which does make sense. I mean, I think you can use the DOI for that, but that's still not necessarily the unique identifier for the record itself in your own system.
Yes, right.
No, that's not. That's different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Because I'm myself the data provider myself. Okay. I'm very concerned. I can insist all the DOI, even for different data, different version, you need to create a new DOI. Okay. Because you don't want to confuse the users. And even the papers. Okay. They already put this data. Suppose it should be recovered. Okay. The science results. Okay. So this exact data there. So it's fine. It's fine. The DOI point to a data landing page. But this data landing page would be the data sets, all the data landing page for the metadata. Okay, so you see, whatever is a unique. So that
should be.
Yeah. Good question, though.
Yes, great. And thanks, Mandy. Nancy, you created. Yeah. Okay. Clarify that.
Did everyone lose sound, or are we just at a awkward lull?
I think it's a working silence.
Oh, okay.
I hope if the other people have gone for early beer, I don't know, but yeah.
Anyway,
everyone's still here.
Frank again, just to break the silence. But I'm filling out form. And I think once I find a little like irritating on the wizard is if I type something in, it seems to me it's giving like all kind of options, you know, sharing like data models, databases, and whatever.
Yes.
Even really fit to answer the question.
No, I share your misery there. I actually, I asked a question of there's a Slack channel for the people who are creating this wizard. And I asked the question about, you know, how that information, it just scrolls through and what's the logic behind it and is it searchable? And the guy who's the support said, well, he thinks it's just as people entered it. And so you have to scroll through, you know, everything to find the right thing, which is supremely annoying from my point of view. So I put basically a ticket in about that. He's going to ask if it's possible to sort them somehow, or at least search, you know, do a better search than just to scroll. So yeah, that's another feedback. So I'm going to put a tick by the fact that you mentioned that, and that's 2 of us at least. Very annoying. That's what I mean. This is a new tool. They're still working on it, but you know, so the pain associated with that. Does that make sense, Frank?
Yeah. That's good.
Okay. That was when you were trying to look for fair sharing, correct? In the fair sharing question?
Yeah. Sometimes, I don't know, it seems to be also fair sharing, but if you say, okay, you know, do you have this protocol or so and so? And I say, no, we don't really use any protocol, so.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So Nancy, this is Ruth again. I'm still stuck on research domain because actually there's a new DRAO release and the GitHub repository has changed the way they name the releases. So the link is wrong, but I went over to the GitHub repository and got the latest release, opened it up and did not find any research domains. And then if you actually look at what it has, they're all data centers as in the drop down. So it's like, that's not right. Like, why is the GIS Maps portal at AWI a research domain? That's not a research domain. That's a repository.
Yes. No, I know. I know. There's also an SRAO, which is a subject research. That might be closer to it. That's what I ended up going to finally in desperation, and found something that was similar. So that's why I started using, you know, the subject area and the fair sharing, just to have something that was similar to what they had. But that's the kind of thing that, you know, I think we should give them feedback on. Now that's fair sharing, not the data stewardship wizard folks, but still.
Ruth brings up a good point that I'd like to piggyback off of. It's important to be very specific about your research domain. And I noticed those that chose one that was actually a domain seem to get very specific, but it's difficult when you're someone who works across several domains and you're trying to assist people in recommending standards if they're not more generalized. So my example is material science, but looking at the granularity of the other domains chosen by things, it's rarely that, you know, high level domain.
And I'm going to echo that as well, because really what I'm trying to do is talk about the polar community, and that's all domains.
Right. Well, you know what, I think, I mean, if you, I had that same question too, because I was trying to find, you know, what to work with a clearinghouse on. And, you know, there is this information network that GoFair is working on, the Data Stewardship Competence Center, which are, you know, also include registries for training resources, but they're not in there as a domain. And I didn't feel like I could speak for them necessarily. So that's why I went to just something broad like education. But the other thing that may be a way to get around it is to go into the collections area of the fair sharing, because it's not exactly clear what those are, but it looked like that might be a place where, you know, something like the polar community could pull together.
Well, so what I ended up doing is putting research domain all.
Okay. Well, you know, these are real issues. You know, I mean, I think this is what's interesting about this whole process is as you start going through this, you think, yeah, but you know, that's not necessarily going to work in a machine actionable sharing point of way, right? So there are lots of that's the challenge that Eric was talking about. You know, it's something that
well, if I had actually found in that ontology something called research domain that had under it a whole bunch of other domains, which by the way, I've created that ontology. I would have used that top one, research domain, and because that, you know, is just general, you know, it got all of them under it.
Well, so maybe you should suggest adding that to the fair sharing. What you get, it's real easy to do. You just go to the top, and as you see, I mean,
oh, any problems, please tell us.
Well, and tell us what's missing. Add missing resources to our spreadsheet. So you go to that spreadsheet that's at the top in the yellow there, and you know that's where I added the Learning Resource Metadata Initiative. I haven't heard anything from them, but you know that's the manual curation that 2 or 3 different organizations are committed to looking at and reviewing. And then you put your name down if you want to be the contact person or, you know, somebody who answers those questions.
God.
But
yeah. Do I want to maintain that? No, that was for a project.
No, that isn't what I don't think you necessarily have to maintain it to get it added. They do ask you who would it be. And
well,
you know,
see, that's the problem. It would have to be me because I don't think there is anybody else. And I was only doing it because of the EarthCube project. So really, it should be the EarthCube office that maintains it.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem with all ontologies, isn't it? Not all, but yeah.
Everything but the ones in the biomedical field.
Right. Who have money for it, yeah. But again, that's a challenge. I mean, that's a challenge to having this be a fair ecosystem.
But I just don't understand how come they have the wrong thing in there. I mean, that sounds, I mean, where do you create a trouble ticket for the fair sharing wizard?
The DS wizard?
Yeah.
That would probably be, there is a contact link down there, I think, at the bottom.
Yep, bottom left has help and then report an issue.
Yeah.
All right, I'll report an issue.
Thank you.
Oh, they want it to in their GitHub repository. Yet another, thou shalt learn how to use GitHub whether you want to or not.
For what it's worth, if you do have a fair sharing issue, they're super easy to get a hold of and talk with the human and resolve things quickly. And since they're on European time, you put in something in the afternoon and you got an answer and a fix before you're up the next morning.
Yeah, that might be the way to go, because I mean, some of the same people work on fair sharing as work on the DS Wizard tool. So, and
well, actually, I do have a GitHub account, so
okay.
Yes, I'm writing an issue.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Well, it's right on the top of the hour. Do people need a couple more minutes? I don't know if we necessarily need to debrief unless as we've been talking as we go. We can.
See, I just put in a comment. Didn't fair sharing start out originally as something called biosharing? Which is why there's such a bias towards the bio.
Could be.
Doing things.
It's very possible. I remember reading it about somewhere, but I don't remember what they said. It's very possible. Developed by Yeah, I'm not sure. Go to the bottom and see. Community timeline. Yes, it is. You're right. 2009, biosharing blog launched associated. These are different milestones. Portal launched in 2011. Yeah. 2016. Yep. Sounds like it. Leslie, the historian. So how are people doing?
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to say that it had a bias towards bio, right? Which is why there isn't much earth and environmental. And based on, I think you were in my vocabulary session yesterday. Is this worth thinking about? We start putting some of our standards and ontologies into this, if this is going to be backed so much?
I should note that there are 76 earth science related ontologies. Both Suite and Envo are in there. And what we need to ensure is that all of the core ontologies are in there.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that yet. But
but
I have looked at
my argument is that if we want to head for cross-domain science ultimately, then maybe this
I agree.
And this is well supported by the EU.
Yeah, they've got money behind it. So that's one of the reasons I think it makes sense to do it.
Which is
this is Julian. I think also that if there is, I was considering this as I went through it. If you are using something that does have either a site or a record or something that has a DOI, I would use that so that I don't duplicate DOIs for the same thing. Even though, I mean, it would be great to have everything in fair sharing, but if it already has this sort of official place with a DOI or a Perl, then I would stick with that instead of duplication.
Yeah, but it's not so much that what came out of the session I ran yesterday is that even if people have DOIs, there's just too many of them.
I know.
Not so much too many DOIs, don't get me wrong. There's too many separate, disparate systems in the earth and environmental sciences, and they're proliferating because they don't know the others exist. Whereas starting to bring it together in something like fair sharing may stop people unintentionally reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it depending on, the whole point is discoverability too, right? So if there is a DOI and you put that information in, then it's slam dunk for them to add it too.
That's true. Yes.
So, I mean, I would think, I'm guessing, but I don't think it would hurt if it's already essentially got an authority associated with it.
So yes, I'm planning on taking this back to all of the ESIP clusters and the ESIP Semantic Technology Committee, because I think what I saw here today is a good way to motivate getting all the relevant ontologies and things created and agreed to. And I was seeing, I mean, people have been trying to do this for 20 years, but now people are really trying to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Yeah, for the reasons that again Eric showed with the
exactly
Vodon, yeah, and Christine and Go Fair USA has this wonderful series. I mean, Christine will probably talk about this, which I think we should go to fairly soon. A whole series on the Vodon fair data point and how it was created that would also be motivators, because it's gives it really nice background of what happens and what problems there is being solved and how it was created. So.
Cool.
I will give it a quick mention.
Okay. I guess maybe we'll just do. Do you have? Is it a 5-minute thing, Christine? Do you need a little more time, or what's?
No, I mean, it should be 5 minutes. Should be fine.
Okay.
I have some notes which I call my tangent insurance to make sure I stay on topic.
Okay. I was just thinking because people are having to go too. Our numbers are dropping, so you know.
Well, and I can go the other way. I mean, it's I did put it on Sketch, and it's got some links there, so if you know, we can also skip it. It's no problem.
No. I think it's. I don't want to skip it. All I mean, what we've got on the schedule is talking together for another 5 minutes, and then talking with you. But I don't know if people are leaving because they are finished with the FIP time that they've got, then, you know, I don't want people to lose the opportunity to hear from you about Go Fair either. So
let's go to Christine.
Okay. Annie, can you, are Rama and Natalie still
Rama
in the
and
break?
Natalie are still in their breakout, so I can, would you like me to tell them that Christine is going to start sharing?
Yeah, that'd be great.
It looks like I have access to share. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick thing with disconnecting my external monitor. So I mean, I know all the pitfalls usually that happen with Zoom. So if I'm not there for a second, I'm working that out.
Okay. Yeah, DOI crosswalks. That's when it's time to retire, right?
Okay, I've let Rama and Natalie know they're still in that breakout, but they have so been warned.
Okay. Well, when Christine's ready, we can go ahead and if Rama, if people want to hear it, it is on the sketch, as Christine said. So, oh, there's Natalie. Hello.
Hello. Sorry.
It's okay.
Rama and I went down in the weeds.
Well, I'm glad you came back up on the pathway. So we thought we'd go to Christine now. It's a couple minutes early, but people are starting to have to go. So we wanted to make sure people heard what she has to say about Go Fair USA. If you're talking, Christine, I think you're muted.
Okay, is that better? Oh my gosh.
I mean, yes.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you now.
I'm muted.
So yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Because I thought, oh man, if that doesn't work, I don't know what's going to. All right. And the video still looks fine. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. Christine Kirkpatrick from the San Diego Supercomputer Center, where I head up research data services. I'm also the PI of the EarthCube office and a deputy director at the West Big Data Hub. Those supercomputers in our name, we are very invested in data-driven science. We recognize the need to come at science from the perspective of data, not just as raw material to be computed on. but is a resource with its own management needs and with the potential for reuse and integration. We take part in several national and international research data organizations. ESIP is of course one, but included those represented by Data Together, CODATA, Research Data Alliance, where I see and know many of you from, the World Data System, and then GoFair. Though in planning for months, this statement was issued during the pandemic and highlights the complementarity and how they can work together to address data issues relating to COVID work. And there is a March statement. If you look for Data Together, just go to the GoFair site that you can see more about. While each organization plays an important role in our work, we've been especially attracted to GoFair because of its focus on implementation and machine actionability. As we became more deeply involved, we saw a gap in connecting what was happening in the EU to the developing FAIR services, or rather lack thereof, in the United States. This led us to found the US GoFair Coordination Office at SDSC. Our goal is to find working models and to bring them back for US audiences in a way that is relevant to the academic and funding landscape here. So GoFair is organized along 3 pillars: go change, go train, and go build. Now the first one focuses on policies, incentives, and priorities. Go train, as you might guess, focuses on training and skill development, including also just basic awareness of FAIR. And then go build is the technology piece and the tool development. Implementation networks represent areas of special focus, sometimes in a particular domain. So here you can see some of the current implementation networks and where they fall along these 3 pillars. So for example, chemistry is focused on the policy and training side, whereas the newer microbiome IN is focused on the building and training. And some implementation networks, or you'll hear us say IN, like the very new and active virus outbreak data network, or Vodon, span all 3 areas. So here we are last year together in Leiden for the annual implementation networks meeting. We get together at least once a year. We'll see what happens in our new world, but we get together to look across the different efforts and to look for synergies. One such effort was the creation of the matrix, which is a very confusing term, also given the title of our workshop, but a different matrix that looked across the different domains and areas of work to see where there were other identified synergies. These can suggest places for the INs to partner, like new training, new resources to build up. Sometimes the most interesting findings are the gaps. So to have a bunch of people in a domain, I'm part of the metabolomics IN, to say, yeah, okay, it's not you. We haven't converged on what to do as a community for that. And then you can push ahead. Just to say a little bit more about the Vodon Implementation Network, in part because it's timely and also in part because it's a good example of what GoFair is about. Within Vodon, we have the project Vodon Africa, funded in part by the Phillips Foundation and chaired by Dr. Mohammed Mapeza. I can say his name really well, but only when I say half of it. Dr. Mapeza, with Dr. Francisca Oladipo as executive director, and they're both from Kampala International University in Uganda. This initiative works on 3 very complementary projects related to a capacity building for FAIR in the US. The first is the need to train up the data stewardship workforce. The materials and the way of organizing the network of data stewards can be directly applied back here in the US. And secondly, it's the focus on metadata for machines. This is part of the skill building for the data stewards. Through a series of workshops, they're able to find gaps in metadata practices and build things from the ground up if needed. This culminates in the use of FAIR data points, which I believe Eric spoke about earlier. Another point of convergence for people who work in GoFair. Rather than use the old model of trying to collect all the data you need into a data lake, the idea is that published data can be visited, even if this is just metadata about the data that resides there. And this allows algorithms to visit data points and to collect information that they either have access to or that is open and available. And it's through these 3 efforts that Vodon Africa is working to create data stewardship capacity along with infrastructure that can be used for this pandemic and for future challenges. Because this, of course, this isn't the first viral crisis for the current generation to happen on the African continent, like it is for some of us. This is a new thing, but it's not for them. Following the Ebola crisis, all of the data and infrastructure was taken back with researchers to Western countries. So they really had nothing to build upon, for the next crisis. So the idea is here to create a sustainable infrastructure and workforce that can maintain it by Africa for Africa. The Go Fair US office works across the research computing landscape to find the best fair data ecosystem tools and practices available. Among our current and past offerings, data awareness and more in-depth data stewardship training has been offered. This picture is from our first week-long data stewardship training held at SDSC. This is Mark Wilkinson, lead author on the seminal FAIR paper from 2016. Here's our last trip, or my last trip at least in 2020 on a plane, was to Atlanta, Georgia for a workshop we led about advancing FAIR capacity in the US, hosted at Georgia Tech by the South Big Data Innovation Hub. And apologies if I chose the picture of you, for those of you on the call with your eyes closed, I think that's only Chris Erdman. I tried to find a good one of you, Melissa and Julian, so hopefully that's okay. Through this initial group, we're building a community of people in the US who want to build out the FAIR data ecosystem of tools, especially adapted for US needs. We have broad participation across institutions and organizations with funding from NSF, DOE, NIH, as well as consultants ready to begin filling the gap of the estimated 500,000 data stewards that will be needed in our country over the next few years. So thank you, Nancy, for being one of those people. We work to connect implementation networks in the US, especially where there's of great interest. 2020 saw the first implementation network to come out of the US, the FAIR microbiome IN that I mentioned during the matrix discussion. We are an active member of Vodon and Vodon Africa for the reasons I mentioned on the last slide. We hosted a 4-part webinar series on Vodon and the intersection of COVID, data science, and FAIR. And then people were so interested in Vodon Africa that we had a follow-up 3-part series, and these are all posted on our website. I believe I have the link in here somewhere, but if not, I'm happy to give it to you. You can see all the recorded videos, and we have links to many of the slides on our website as well. But we looked at the pandemic from the lens of each partner country, as well as common approaches and challenges. We also look towards what gaps need filling, especially coming from a research computing organization. In particular, we're standing up a FAIR data point proof of concepts and hoping to build a network of FAIR data points. So at the beginning of August, we'll launch the new Go Fair US website that details all the different communications channels available. And some of us use these already, like the Go Fair US Slack is pretty active. We also have recaps of the February workshop, more about the Vodon implementation network, and other ways to be engaged. And we are thankful for our partners. I want to give a quick shout out to Chris Erdman. Sorry again to use the picture of you with your eyes closed if you ever see this recording, and Julian Schneider for joining us in the US office efforts. And I don't mean to miss acknowledging Melissa Cragen's efforts here as well. So that's all I've got for that. I'm happy to take questions. Hopefully I didn't abuse my time slot.
Nope, sounds good. Anybody have questions? Leslie, you had a question, I think, from the chat.
Christine, I was just interested in the spreadsheet you showed in the second or third or fourth slide. Is that available?
Let's see. I know it is a Google sheet. Let me see what the permissions are, because last time I think one of the reasons I have a screenshot versus the link is I think it was only available if you were an author. Yeah. But let me find it, and if I can, real quick, I'll post it into the chat here.
Okay, thanks, Christine.
Any other questions? I actually had one if nobody else did. So, Christine, one of the things that Eric mentioned was the fact that there'll be M4M, machines for metadata workshops that are scheduled on different projects, it sounds like, in the EU. Is that something that the Go Fair USA office might do too, is sponsor those kinds of workshops for, because that it strikes me that might be something that would be useful for this community, you know, to really dive into the an understanding of what machines for metadata are or is, I guess, as opposed to that for discovery only, or kind of the typical understanding of metadata.
Definitely. In fact, that's our plan, is to do something like this. I think one of the challenges will be, and this harkens back to a comment in the last half hour, a lot of these things are developed first for the biomedical community. And because a lot of the recent work has been around COVID, our challenge will be, how can we take the core of what was created and then have it be more generalizable? And then what can we do to make it more useful for a geo audience? And so, especially given the overlap of the Go Fair US efforts and the EarthCube office, I mean, this is something that, yes, we definitely would like to do. I'm not saying that EarthCube's offering a metadata for machines, but we are very mindful in EarthCube, especially the EarthCube office, of, don't just promote FAIR, but give people easy ways to do things, to make their data fair, because it can be very complex just to figure out how to do the first step for any one of these letters if you're not someone who's living and breathing FAIR and all things data.
Right. Yeah, well, it also seems that, again, from an earth science point of view, one of the things that seemed to work well for moving efforts forward for the whole verification framework and so on was the fact that there was a crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. Now, we're not looking for crises in earth science, but if there's some sort of a problem that, could bring a number of disciplines together, like Ruth, you were talking about I don't know if Ruth is still here, with the polar community, or the indigenous community as it relates to data or something like that. If we could pull together a use case that could be the focus, one or two that could be the focus of a machine for metadata workshop, that would both help the earth science community understand more about FAIR, but be a practical, useful implementation of something like Vodon. Is that part of what it would take to do that?
So if this is Melissa, and if it's okay, Christine, I have just two kind of comments to Nancy's question. The first is that in fact, there's no timeline, but there's actually concrete action happening around at least starting to talk with Eric about M4M. He and I have a call set up in August already, specifically on some of the changes that are happening around that, so we can think about how to activate that here. But secondly, on this last question, Christine put together a workshop proposal out of EarthCube to NSF, and we ran that workshop the day before ESIP winter meeting, and it was the Convergence Accelerator, Open Knowledge Network, and EarthCube workshop to think about how do we bring together the communities that are developing open knowledge graphs and semantic tools together with the EarthCube community and EarthCube projects, or EarthCube funded projects. And so the report from that workshop is just out. And in fact, there are 3 case studies outlined in the report itself, but then there are position papers outlining a whole number of other potential cases where bringing together M4M along with knowledge graph information, some of the Convergence Accelerator work, this is a place where actually we have an opportunity to potentially put in proposals for another workshop or two that would utilize or leverage the workshop that we ran in January, and now start to merge this with some FAIR activities.
So, can I chip in here on what my community is? So this is coming out of the Arctic Data Committee, which is under the Arctic Council, which the US is no longer president for. I think it's Canada now, I'm not sure. Anyway, but there has been a group under IASC and IRPIC that is about data. And there is quite a bit of work going on in that group. It's obviously extremely international, with everybody from New Zealand and Australia to Europe to the United States, and Canada, and etc. And while it's started kind of Arctic-y, I note that actually SCATM, which means Antarctica, and basically it really covers all of what the cryosphere community calls the 3 poles. In other words, if it's cold there, this group covers it. And they have been trying to do federated search, just a simple temporal spatial parameter search across their at least 81 repositories now for a couple decades. But they actually have spun up a group, which is an international group called Polder. Of course, I don't remember what that acronym stands for either. Polar Data Enhancement, Polar Data Enhancement Research Group. And they're currently concentrating on things like schema.org because that community has really large repositories like NASA and NOAA and USGS and you name it, but and DOE even, but it also goes all the way down to the indigenous community heritage center type places. So everything from places that have huge technological capability to communities with data where there might be 0.1 FTE of a person running the whole facility, and they might not have much of anything, including internet. And so that is an international community that includes things like SAON and probably all the other acronyms that have anything to do with the Arctic. And I don't remember the name of any of these acronyms, except there are a lot of them. But anyway, that community is trying to move this forward, and they have started using graphs. And in fact, I can show you a graph of who is harvesting metadata from whom, and that leads to a lot of problems. But you'd have to give me a minute if you wanted me to do that. And I don't know if any of that is relevant to this group.
Well, I mean, if it makes sense to think about it's essentially creating a use case around which we could do more education and, leverage the work that the workshop that Melissa referenced, it might make sense to think about that. It sounds like maybe it's too big, I don't know, but that can be an ongoing discussion if it looks like that would be useful. I want to honor people's time here too, and it does fit into kind of the close-up question, which is, are there things we should be doing to further this work throughout ESIP? And it sounds like maybe there's an opportunity there, given what you were describing, Melissa, to identify use cases or situations within ESIP that we could use. Does that make sense?
Nancy, could I just bring this up to a higher level? Because I'm here from Australia. Is there a connection between this GoFair work and EarthCube? Or whether Christine or Melissa could answer that.
Yeah, well, I think in that it's the same people working on it, and that are the convergence of interests that brought us to both things. So I would say the part that is GoFair that is not EarthCube is the part that's trying to figure out what's practical, what's of interest in the US, and let's get real, what our funding agencies are interested in funding, because it's a very different landscape than either Australia or the EU or Canada. And then the EarthCube side of that is trying to port over the services and offerings that are of interest in geo, but maybe curated to a heavier degree. And I'm of course using the curated and not the purest form. So apologies. I know I hate when people do that, but trying to sift through it. I know what I hear time and time again is it's too overwhelming. There's too much information. Just tell me the first couple things I should do and get me started. And so that's where you would see some of the Go Fair pieces. But we do try, as we have offerings, like with our webinars and other things, to put it on our social media for EarthCube and to have it when it's appropriate in our newsletter. And so if we do have upcoming trainings that I think, initially people were holding off to say, okay, when is this going to be over so we can plan again? Now we know to just plan for virtual. So we expect to see some more concrete plans now that it's the new normal. And I will put a link to our Vodon series in the chat, and also try and get it to our notes as well.
Okay.
I did want to give a quick shout out to Natalie Myers, who I forgot to mention. It was part of that and gives a great keynote.
That's what I was trying to get, because this is ESIP Earth Sciences, EarthCube's Earth Sciences. Nancy, it's kind of where's the connections from Earth Sciences through to Go Fair? Not so much where a country's connecting, but based on also some of the things that Ruth's been saying with the ESIP semantics into fair sharing. It's just trying to map out those connections. I don't know whether they're worth doing or not. So I can tell you in Australia, there's zero.
You can look, sorry, Leslie, it's Natalie, in the Go Fair implementation networks and in the FIP matrix creator itself, you'll see some participating earth science organizations. But because many of the Go Fair implementation networks and original use cases came out of biomedical, physical sciences, and earth observing sciences, really got going about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, starting with HEP Chem and Materials Science, with earth observing science coming along next or concurrent with those. So I don't think it's a position of lack of will. I think it's a position of maturity in adoption. And I think the AGU Enabling Fair Data project that Shelley ran is an example of how earth science engaged at that very basic level first. Yeah. If that's any help. I know it's no consolation, but I think what we see is a mountain of work to do.
Yeah, no, I'm just sort of, okay, I see the FAIR projects, I was part of it. That was the start. This is the next phase.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it, right? We're on a road trip.
And well, again, I've got to be careful because I'm talking from Australia. With regard to earth sciences, I'm not seeing the connection. So that's why I'm questioning about is EarthCube or is ESIP going to get connected into it? Because once those connections start, then it's easier to bring it into Australia.
Well, and the connections, I know where you have to finish up. The connections can happen in small doses too. That's why I'm suggesting, one step at a time. So maybe just to wrap up, I know it's time to close up. May I suggest that we continue the discussion? What would be the best way? Through the Go Fair USA Slack channel? Can people join that? Melissa and Christine, would that be the place to continue these discussions?
Yes, although we could also use our EarthCube Slack channel. So either whichever one is more interesting to people and that they might make use of, might be apt to make use of, either one's a good choice.
Well, I would think that probably EarthCube would be then, because the Go Fair USA is a little broader, and if we're focused on.
Yeah.
So maybe we could suggest that, and then we've got 3 takeaways to take away. I think what maybe the moderators can either now after we finish or at another time if we need to go and take a break, we can come up with those 3 takeaways to add to the document before the end of the session, and then. I want to just thank everybody for the moderators, especially for all the help and connections, and for Christine and Eric, of course, who's not here, but Julian as well. For thanks, we pulled it together finally, and I think it's an opportunity to continue to work together. If we got ideas for the next ESIP meeting or other things to do too, let's keep it going. So, anything else anybody wants to add? Annie, do you need to, or Zachary, add anything?
I think you got it all. It was great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Okay.
I have one.
Nice to be together.
Okay.
And that is that those of us who work beyond earth science, all this go fair type of stuff applies to. The polar community has all disciplines. And when I say all, I mean all, and I'm including humanities and art. And in fact, the oral tradition, for example, is where much of the data comes from, and it's real data. So personally, I would say not EarthCube. I would say it's broader than EarthCube.
Well, maybe it's a place to start, and then, you know, it can all, there's no reason why we couldn't go two places too. So, you know, suggestions about how to do that would be something we can continue through ESIP channels as well.
Both places. Oh, sorry, Nancy. Yeah.
Yeah, go now.
You're welcome in both places. But for those of you who only aspire to do this for geosciences, we can converge on EarthCube, and that's how you can hear more about offerings that might be of interest to you. And would love to have more people participating and go for US in the broader sense.
Great, thank you. All right, sounds good. Well, thanks everyone. Zachary, and the only other thing is we need to put all these notes from the chat into the document. Is that right? Is to just copy paste?
You can actually save the chat.
Yeah, the chat automatically downloads on my computer, Nancy, as a text file. And so as soon as I get that, I will just attach it and send it to you in an email.
Yay.
Okay.
Namaste.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Everybody.
Yeah, bye.